Okay, welcome everybody. This is the Chartered Accountants Ireland webinar on interviews, do's and don'ts, and thanks everybody for giving up a bit of your lunch today to listen to me. I'm just going to crack on. My name is Dave Reardon. I'm a member of the careers team in the Institute here. I'm also an ACA member of the Institute myself, just by way of introduction. And this webinar, I'm going to keep it short and punchy, about 20-25 minutes probably. It's going to be a reminder for many of you of stuff you already know, but hopefully it's good tips, pointers, thoughts and insights for first and second round interviews, essentially. These tips should be relevant for all levels, CFO through to newly qualified. I've also split the session between what to do before the interview and then what to do during the interview itself, with a few obvious don'ts then towards the end, and then we can take a few questions if you have any. So as I said, about 20-25 minutes and punchy. So just to crack on with it, before the interview itself, there are some essentials that you need to look at, and key do's. Obviously, do your research on the company and the people. Just keep going, guys. Some of the obvious stuff, just get out of the way as well. I mentioned downloading the accounts of the company you're going to meet. Wear a suit, dress appropriately, tie or no tie. It depends on who you're going into, but keep it professional, keep it clean cut. If you're using a recruiter as an introduction, make sure they do an interview preparation session with you. That's can be invaluable. Try to find out what is the interview style of the person that's going to be sitting in front of you. Are they going to do a competency-based interview, or is it a CV talk through? What sort of approach are they going to take, and you can prepare accordingly. Try to get insights into the personalities of the interviews. Review their LinkedIn profiles, get the recruiter to tell you a little bit about who you're going to meet and how they like to approach the interview itself. It's very important going into any interview to know your key selling point stories, as I call them. Write them down and practice relaying them concisely. Stories are always the best way of getting across your strengths and examples of your track record. Make sure, however, you've practiced how you're going to get this across the night before. Know those strengths and your value add for the role itself, and back them up with the stories mentioned. Review the spec that you've been given and know the top 3 or 4 key elements that the hirer is actually really seeking. Like, a spec will only ever really tell you about 30% of what is being sought in a role, and try and get the background information on that. It's good to know where your weaknesses are for a role as well, and how you're going to tackle this issue if they start probing. Can you compensate for this? Are you a very quick learner? Fine. Give me a quick example of how you're a quick learner then as well. Try to establish your USP. What makes you stand out from the other 8 people that are now interviewing alongside you? It's very important to be vigilant of that. More often than not, like, your transferable skills mean you're going to be able to do this job standing on your head, but you need to be aware of the 8 people that are standing alongside you in terms of competition for the role, and what they're bringing to the role, and where's your edge, what's your USP, and how can you differentiate yourself in terms of the other interviewees? Can you stand out as a better communicator, a better people leader, more meticulous, better relationship builder, etc.? Whatever is the key that the interview is looking for. Other obvious stuff then in advance of the interview itself that you should do is to know the location, the route, the traffic on the way. Are you clear on the duration? Have you brought coins for parking? What are the parking facilities? And who is the correct person to ask for at reception? All very simple stuff, but can be easy to overlook. Just a side point that can sometimes help to warm up the interview itself as well. If the interview knows someone that you know, it can be worth making that connection. You can do the homework on LinkedIn in advance just to see what the connections are, and if there's maybe an overlap there, that could be a talking point as well. So that echoes all of what I said. That's just a kind of visual slide in terms of the non-verbal communications, just to be aware of. It's such an important piece in any interview, obviously, and just to be aware of how you carry yourself going into an interview. And we'll touch on that a little bit in terms of the interview piece itself. So during the interview, the morning of or the day of the interview, I would tend to have a coffee or an energy drink before you go in, just to get focused, arrive early, make sure your energy levels are up. It's very important. Personally, when I'm meeting someone at reception in an interview style scenario, I prefer to stand rather than be sitting down when I meet them. That's just a personal foible. Greet them, smile, have some idle chit chat, talk about beautiful premises they're in, the great location, some recent news about the company itself or a recent event that they've held, and have something to talk through when you're on the way to the interview room, other than the weather. This is the kind of elevator chat piece that you're going to have in the back of your mind when you meet the person. Have good, firm, confident handshake and good eye contact are a given, again, stating the obvious. Good positive body language in general. As mentioned, this is pretty crucial, and mind your demeanor. Remember, in a way, like the interview is a mini play. It's your time to act up and get your best self forward. Enjoy singing your own praises and bigging yourself up. Relax, enjoy listing your past accomplishments. It's the one time when an accountant has become a little bit of a salesperson, so you might as well enjoy singing your own praises. Next thing is to listen. Often an employer will start the interview by telling you a little bit about the company itself and the reasoning behind the actual requirement and the role in hand. You can file this away, use this information to ask clever questions later on, but make sure you listen carefully. Lean forward or lean in, as Sheryl Sandberg would say. Look interested, look focused, and maintain good eye contact, as mentioned. Don't put your CV open in front of you. There shouldn't be a need. You should know your CV pretty implicitly. There's no need for a pen and paper or notepad, really. Focus on the people in front of you in terms of the interview. You will be well able to articulate your moves on your CV and your reasoning about how you've built your career path to this point without having the CV in front of you. The correct way will be to have your hands folded in front of you on the table, and that's the best approach. Get your personality across, smile, laugh, display confidence and self-assuredness. Try to get on well with the interviewers rather. You'd be surprised how often an offer is actually made on the basis of good connection, good dynamic between the interview and the interviewees. Sometimes just the people you're working with and getting on well with them is the most important thing in terms of a dynamic. So try to click with them. Make sure that you have practiced your paragraph example answers and keeping them clear, punchy, and to the point. And by that I mean you go into any interview really with about 4 or 5 key examples that are your core, your framework in terms of how you get across your track record and your effectiveness in previous roles. Use those examples and stories intermittent in different ways depending on the questioning, and always have just another side tip would be have some point in your back pocket that you want to get across to the interviewer at some stage during the meeting itself. It could be anything from sporting performance. It could be anything from your annual rating when you were an audit senior in Big Four being exceptionally good, or something that your boss would have said that you're particularly good at down through the years. But just keep it in your back pocket and try and use it at some point during the interview. dissect the spec very carefully going in. I think it's important if you get a good spec, particularly, try to address every single element in it, pick your way down through it, uh, and have something constructive to say about every piece of it. If competencies are listed towards the end, make sure you have a really strong story for each competency that exemplify how good you are at that. Be very clear on why you want this job and articulate that well to the interviewers. Be honest and forthright. It's not constructive to be coy. Get your personality across. It's very important. I always say this to anyone doing an interview prep with. Um, does this match with the interviewers in terms of being light, friendly, smiley, serious, business-like? Good to know what demeanor or what approach the interviewers take towards their interview style going in, so that you have an indication of the tone and how that's going to fit, and you can kind of match that to a degree. Then have good, insightful questions based on the research that you've done and your background information. Um, Often I'm told the following day when I'm giving feedback that the person might have asked really good, insightful questions, and that was actually the deciding factor in terms of deciding between two different candidates or members. Um, Maybe let them know if they're up against the clock with regards to first, second, or third round interviews that you have at this time, and any other time pressure that in relation to your process. So just being open in terms of where you're at in terms of your overall search. If you feel the interview is going well, let the interviewer know where you stand in with other processes, just to be fair. That can sometimes help them accelerate their process with you if they're really keen. If you're asked about salary, as sometimes can come up, my approach to that would be if the recruiter has put you forward, that you can indicate the recruiter has indicated where you're coming from in terms of current and target salary, and keep it as simple as that. If you haven't gone forward through a recruiter and you've applied directly, again, just be honest. Let them know what salary you're on currently and roughly what it would take for you to move to the role on offer. Just so there's a bit of transparency and clarity on that. Good example questions that we've mentioned there can include systems used, ERPs, current status, plans to upgrade, any significant change in the 12 months ahead in terms of the company or the team. Where's the line in the sand for this role in the next 6 or 12 months time? What does the role need to achieve, or what would I need to achieve in the role, and what are the KPIs for the role? It shows a bit of ambition, so as you're trying to put one foot into the role and help them solve the problem with the hire. Just to finish then with a few do's and don'ts. I would say, just to keep it really simple: glass of water, yes; coffee service, no. Don't waffle ramble. Take time getting to the point. Don't fidget. Keep your hands together on the table in front of you. Don't slouch. Don't ask "what's in it for me" style questions. Keep it positive and focus on what you can bring to the table and what value add you can bring to the role itself. Don't diss or talk negatively about your previous employer. It doesn't reflect well on you. And don't look half interested. Don't fail to sell your strengths for the role in question. Be very clear on why you're moving and why this role appeals to you and what you like about the job. Do leave with a smile and a thank you, and if circumstance allows, do let them know that this is a role that you're really interested in. Sometimes that can be a differentiator if they know that a particular candidate is actually really keen for the position itself. So just coming towards the last bit really, and a couple of tips, so flying through it, but a final word would be, and just a reassurance, I suppose, as well. Sometimes there's no accounting for the interviewer and the personality on the other side of the table. If it's not a match, then it wasn't meant to be. it's important that you do get on well with a potential new employer. So I'm not saying interview the interviewer, but just be cognizant of the personalities, try and get on with them. If it's not a click, then you're probably better off in terms of it being a key career move for you. Finally, it's always good to follow up with an email to the interviewer if that fits, or an email in terms of feedback to the recruiter, just giving your kind of thoughts on the interview. If you're emailing the interviewers themselves directly, just thank them for their time and let them know that you're still very keen on the opportunity itself. And then that's it in a nutshell. I'll be in the careers team, and you're more than welcome to contact me at any stage on 6377251. Particularly if you have any upcoming interviews that you need to prepare for and want to do a bit of an interview preparation session, I'm more than happy to have a call or talk through. Okay. It's actually a question there from Ronan in terms of salary negotiation. I think in the last issue of Accountancy Ireland, there was actually a very good article written on salary negotiation that you might refer to, Ronan. But at the offer stage, in terms of interviews, best to route it if you're working through a recruiter. The important thing is for someone to start on the right basis, that they go in happy in terms of the salary that they're due to receive, or in terms of where they're coming from in terms of salary. I would say just be clear on the salary bracket that the employer is offering as well, so that you don't have the wrong end of the stick on that. And once you're clear on that bracket, you'll know from where you're coming from, just to be able to justify what you're looking for, and be clear with any recruiter you're working with in terms of what is going to work for you moving into a role. Question there from David in terms of any advice regarding public sector interviews for newly qualified accountant, how might they differ? Yeah, David, I think my understanding, I've limited experience working with public sector, but plenty of semi-state. In terms of full public sector, I know it can be a much more involved interview process, so just have patience with that. Sometimes can go 3, 4, 5 rounds, with a lot involved. So allocate your timelines. It can run over a number of weeks and even months, and just be patient with that. Be vigilant of that if you've got other processes going on, and maybe public sector is your favorite opportunity. So just manage your own timelines in that regard. And if you're dealing directly with HR, as often is the case on public sector opportunities, just form a bit of a relationship with them, try and get as much information about the process itself and what's involved on that. Hopefully that's useful. And particularly for a newly qualified, if you're stepping into and you haven't done a huge amount of interviewing beforehand, it's really good to just get some interview prep advice and practice going into it. Sometimes, like public sector roles, can be quite structured in terms of their interviewing. There can be panels, and very much competency based. So they can be really good to do in terms of your interview practice, but just do get a bit of a heads up going into them.